Okay, so in this video I'm going to talk about arcs, how I combat arcs. Sometimes I'll get an arc, but it's probably because I've got something trapped underneath the squeegee, bit of grit or something. But most of the time it's not because I'm on dry glass. Now, all my squeegees on my liquidators have an insert in there, and that keeps the rubber very tight. I do not want any of that action. Just a slight movement like that will give me an arc on the glass. So I don't want any of that. So having that insert in there, doesn't matter what rubber I'm using. Some rubbers have a thicker bulb than others. If I am unfortunate enough to be using a strip of Etray rubber, it's got a thicker bulb to it, I'll still put either a paper clip or a nice long thin pin in there to keep that rubber from moving on both sides of the end clips. Okay, so quite often people say when I'm cleaning the windows, I'm going on too much dry glass. Let's just clean this window here and I'll just keep going on dry glass. I'm not getting any snagging, I'm not getting any friction. This squeegee rubber is still wet. It helps having a nice clean window to work on, but I'm on dry glass here. I've got no snagging whatsoever. I've also got no hazing, so that helps. So I'm still on this dry glass here. It's getting a bit stiffer to work on. The friction's building up, but I'm not getting any snagging issues. Okay, I'm not getting any squeaking or anything like that. So the biggest factor of me not getting these constant errors with my squeegee rubber is I've not got well, I've made sure I've got this pinned so it's nice and tight. Okay, and it's very affordable because paper clips cost you nothing. It's very time effective because all you do is when you put your rubber in, you reuse, or you just use a brand new off clip or a pin, shove it in there and it stays there until you want to change your rubber side over. Take the pins out, take the rubber out, put it back in, put the pins back in, and you can carry on working on when now it's starting to squeak a bit. Right, so the other problem is lots of questions about the same sort of thing from all over the world is I get this film, I get this haze effect, along with the arcs, along with lines, and well, so when it's cold and when it's moisture in the air, you get this lagging effect. So it's about 25, 26 degrees right now, but it's muggy and it's moisture in the air. When I make a swipe here, I've got a few milliseconds of haze left behind before it evaporates. Now when it's really, really cold, when you make that swipe, okay, you get that longer effect. And sometimes if it stays on there for too long or the window isn't completely clean, it will dry, or sometimes it causes problems. Quite often it doesn't for me, but if it's on there for too long, the likelihood is it will dry with a dry haze patch. Right, so how can you combat that as best you can? So there's a number of things that I do, and it's called adapting and evolving to the right circumstances. So number one, if I'm used to using a big squeegee on a big window, it might be beneficial for me to scale back the size of the squeegee. Now I'm using just a normal standard flattened out handle here, but that's perfect to work on even when it's freezing cold, or it's not just freezing cold, it's muggy in the atmosphere. Okay, so the second thing that I want to concentrate on is not making so much exaggerated turns, just concentrate on my turns a little bit less. You know, I need to start working a little bit more refined because I've got problems with I don't want to make too exaggerated turns basically, especially when I'm getting a long lagging effect on the glass. Another thing to consider is make sure your rubber is sharp, okay, not just at the edges here, ends here, but your rubber is sharp. So if the rubber is about 4 or 5 days old, I still would say that's still relatively sharp. Anything over a week and a half, then your rubber starts blunting out slightly. Now, that's not a problem for most scenarios to work in, but when it's muggy sort of situations or cold and damp situations, that will increase the likelihood of having a longer lasting lagging haze effect. So when you do this, you got all this haze effect to the lag time. And another thing that I want to stress is try and work, or don't try, just do it, work in a flattened out angle, right? Because what you want to do is, with your newish sharp rubber, okay, you're going to make your angle just a little bit steeper on your glass, on your angle of attack. And now, because you've made it a little bit steeper, it's now catching that solution more. Okay, so you're working more than what you would do in normal circumstances, but it's doing something that's benefiting you from reducing that haze effect. Now, all those things I've mentioned here, has anyone on YouTube or on any forum or on any Facebook post said any of this information? The answer is 100% no. Okay, so the reason is because, well, what other alternatives really do we have on YouTube? There's a few window cleaners on YouTube that use the liquidator and advise people to up their game, use better performing tools and techniques and soap solutions, but most of the time the big boys are just using these sort of tools in 40 degree, and they're not really taking you outside the box. They're just showing you how to work like anybody else in the world, and that means working longer, harder, slower, further, and getting less results. So hopefully those comments that I've just made about pinning the rubber and haze effect when it's either cold conditions and it's moisture in the air, or now it's really warm but it's still got a lagging effect because it's been raining earlier, so the air's muggy. Right, so let's move on. Another thing that could cause you arcs is if your rubber has too much burring on here, on the ends here, because that's where your rubber will burr out much quicker than here. You can, when you start doing your fanning maneuvers, you start seeing, oh, I've got a constant line. If you've got a line once every so often, that's not a problem. But if you've got a constant line, then you know it's time to either swap your rubber over or put a new rubber in. Now, how do I know all this information about working in cold conditions and you know, moisture and angles and rubber and sharpness and stuff like that, and nobody else kind of talks about it and knows about? Well, the reason is because I do a lot of experimentation. I do things that people wouldn't even think about doing, but I need to find out answers. When you're working on and designing the best performing squeegee in the world, you need to think just more than just tool and technique. You know, you need to think about lots of problems that will arise in one circumstance or another circumstance. And one of these experiments that I did was, I've got a piece of soft rubber, 22-inch long, okay, and I used it to death, both sides, in a 22-inch channel. Right, the ends burred out, cut down the ends, cut down the squeegee rubber, shoved it in a 20-inch channel. You can't buy 20-inch out of the shop for liquidators, but I've got a 20-inch liquidator. Then after that was, you know, used to death, I shoved it in an 18, and then I shoved it in a 16. After that was used to death, then I shoved it in a 14, all the way down to a 10-inch. Okay, it lasted 9 to 10 months. Okay, what did I find? Well, I found that every time I snipped down the ends of the rubber, there was no more burring, right? But overall, the rubber had just flattened out. And what happens is the squeegee rubber won't work. It will get stiffer. It will get harder to work with turning. It will start leaving film behind, you know, after many months of using it. Both sides of the rubber, so the sharpness disappears. Okay, and although I've got decent ends here, everything becomes slower, lethargic, and you have to keep going over the same place because it's missing, it's skipping. It's not jumping, it's just missing solution. And then it becomes so useless that, you know, what alternative it, you know, if it's a case of working with this that it's not picking up any more solution, and using a tool like this, well, they're both bad decisions to, you know, both scenarios. What would you rather have? Well, probably would rather have a rubber that is newer or is new in this useless channel here, and you know, work longer, harder, slower, get less results that way, rather than using a rubber that just will stop working altogether. So it's harder to use, gets stiffer and stiffer on the turns, and it just takes less and less solution off the glass until it's basically, you start using the squeegee and it's just hardly taking anything off the glass. So how many window cleaners have done that over the lifetime of window cleaning? I guess, well, very few. But experimental wise, zero. Now, when I get people ask me the problems, what they got, lines, my question is, how long you had that rubber in that squeegee for? Sometimes I find out that that rubber's been in there in that same channel. It hasn't been used to death like my squeegee rubber experimentation that I did, but it's been in that channel for 18 months and it's been used to death. It's been battered, and this is only a few, but window cleaners who have problems with lines, they blame the tool straight away. Well, no, it's because you've used the same rubber for 6 months to a year to 18 months or longer. The rubber stops working. Doesn't matter what brand it is, the rubber stops working. Lines, film, even if you look up, I looked after that rubber for 9 months. It wasn't giving me lines, it was just missing solution. Every time I turned, I was just going over. It's like I'm not even touching the glass. It's just not picking anything up anymore. In certain patches, when I'm going straight, it will pick up, but most of the time, it's just skimming right over the solution. So, before you ask the questions, my liquidator is causing me lines. Think how long you've had that rubber inside that channel. It's probably a lot longer than what I would say to have in. Now, ask me the question, how long should I keep the rubber for? Well, how long is a piece of string? You know, I can keep my rubbers in my squeegee channel. This is just normal Mormon soft rubber, and it will last me 2 weeks per side, maybe a week on a bad week if it's damaged or something's happened to it. But I'm going to get at least 7 days out of one side of the rubber. But that doesn't mean that's the case for a lot of window cleaners. So if you're constantly getting mistakes, right, that isn't just here and there, then it's just time to either swap the size of your rubber over or just change your rubber completely. So that's the best advice I can give you. It might last you a few days, it might last you a few weeks, but if you're constantly getting these mistakes happening over and over and over time again, then it's time to put in a new rubber. Now, what rubber do I advise you to use? Who knows? What do I use? I use a variety of rubbers. I use NXT rubbers. Most of the time I find they work fine, they last a long time. I'm using Mormon soft rubber here. I can use Mormon hard rubber here. What is the difference between the Mormon hard and the Mormon soft? Well, they last about the same, because if I'm using hard rubber, I've got to put a little bit more pressure on the glass for it to work. It's going to wear out probably a little bit quicker because I'm using a bit more force on the edges and on the glass than it would do if I'm using soft rubber, where I don't have to put as much pressure on. So just because it's hard rubber doesn't mean it's going to necessarily last longer if you've got to add that extra pressure. So, you know, that's hopefully going to answer some of these lines and haze problems. Get your rubbers pinned and try and make sure you're using a sharp rubber when the conditions mean that you're going to get a lagging effect. And when it's just a normal day, the rubber doesn't have to be that sharp, because you're squeegeeing and there's a glide there, there's the solution's right, you're using two hands, you're not getting the same problem occurring over and over again, you're not getting directional change marks, and everything is nice. You don't have to do a steeper angle. What you do have to do is use the best performing squeegee, use the best performing soap solution method, use two hands, either use a flattened out standard handle or an accelerator handle in the hand or on a pole. But what you got not to do is use this dopey thing. Don't work like everyone else.